So you've got the NIST AI Risk Management Framework. It's a fantastic guide for AI governance, no doubt. But here's the real question. How do you take that guide and turn it into a concrete action plan? Well, today we're going to dive into the single most important tool for doing exactly that, AI RMF Profiles. Let's get into it. Look, having the NIST AI Risk Management Framework is a huge step. It's comprehensive, it's robust, but it also begs a critical question, right? How do you actually translate its high-level ideas into specific, practical controls for your unique AI systems, whether they're being used for hiring, finance, or customer service? Over the next few minutes, we're going to build that bridge. First, we'll talk about why a one-size-fits-all approach just doesn't work. Then we'll introduce profiles as your custom blueprint. We'll walk through figuring out where you are now, deciding where you need to be, and finally, turning that gap into a real strategic action plan. Okay, first things first, let's talk about this fundamental challenge that creates what I call the AI governance gap. A powerful framework is an awesome starting point, but the real work? That's in bridging the gap between its big principles and your specific day-to-day applications. You've got to understand, the NIST AI RMF was never meant to be a rigid, universal checklist. It was designed from the ground up to be voluntary and flexible. And why is that? Well, think about it. The risks tied to an AI hiring tool are completely different from the risks of an AI used in medical diagnostics. Context is absolutely everything. And this quote from NIST really gets to the heart of it. It says, AI doesn't operate in a vacuum. Nope, it's tangled up with people, with society, with specific laws. A generic checklist just can't handle all those critical socio-technical details. Trying to use one is, like trying to use the same key to open every single lock. It's just not going to work. So if a generic checklist is out, what's the answer? Well, this is where the whole concept of profiles comes into play. You should think of a profile as your go-to tool for strategic customization. Simply put, a profile is your custom, tailored version of the framework. It spells out exactly what those core functions, like govern, map, measure, and manage, mean for your specific AI system, taking into account your unique needs, your risk appetite, and the resources you actually have. Now, I love this analogy because it makes it so clear. The core framework, that's like the general building code. It gives you the universal safety standards, the fundamental principles. But a profile, that is the specific architect's blueprint for a particular building. You would never, ever build a hospital using the blueprint for a single-family home, right? The same exact logic applies to managing AI risk. And this gets really tangible when you look at some examples. You could build out an AI RMF hiring profile to tackle things like employment law and fairness. Or maybe a fair housing profile that's laser-focused on anti-discrimination rules. For the rest of this explainer, we're going to stick with that hiring profile as our main example so you can see exactly how this works in the real world. All right, so how do you actually build this blueprint? Well, the whole process kicks off with a gap analysis. And step one of that is taking a good, honest look in the mirror and defining your current state. You begin by creating what's called a current profile. And this is not about what you wish you were doing or what you plan to do. It's a completely factual documentation of where you stand right now. How are you actually managing AI risks today? So for our AI hiring tool example, the current profile might uncover a few things. First, bias testing only happens once a quarter, and it's just using one metric. Second, all the documentation is kind of scattered around on some informal wiki. Third, the legal team only gets looped in reactively when there's a problem. And finally, if something goes wrong, the response is just handled by the standard IT plan, not something tailored to AI. This is our factual, as-is starting point. Okay, so once you know where you are, the next logical step is to define your destination. This is your strategic vision for AI risk management. This is the fun part. And we call this your target profile. Now, this isn't just a wish list. It's a serious strategic document that describes the state you want to be in. It's informed by your business goals, your specific legal duties, like employment laws, your risk tolerance, and of course, industry best practices. This is your to-be state. Now, check out the difference in the target profile for that same hiring tool. We're aiming to move from quarterly checks to continuous automated bias monitoring that uses multiple sophisticated fairness metrics. We're getting rid of that messy wiki and replacing it with standardized fact sheets so everyone's on the same page. Legal review is now proactive and mandatory, and we have a specialized cross-functional incident response plan that's actually been tested. See, this is what good looks like for us. Okay, and here's the payoff. We have our as is, we have our to be, and that space right in between them. That's where strategy is born. This is where your strategy really starts to take shape. When you put your current profile and your target profile side by side, you're basically doing a formal gap analysis. And this comparison makes your shortfalls crystal clear. They're no longer just vague worries. They become specific, identifiable problems you can actually solve. And this table just illustrates the process beautifully. We're mapping those gaps directly to the NIST RMF's functions. So that gap in legal review, that falls under Govern 1.1. The gap in our fairness testing, that lines up with Measure 211. And that weak incident response, that's a problem within Manage 4.3. This table isn't just an analysis, it's your roadmap. It tells you exactly which parts of the framework need your focus to close your specific gaps. And that is the absolute key. This analysis isn't some academic exercise you do and then file away. It transforms your risk management from a guessing game into a data-driven strategy. Now you know precisely where to put your budget, your people, and your time to get the biggest bang for your buck. So from here, the path forward is actually pretty clear. Step 1, you've already identified the gaps. Step 2, you prioritize them based on risk. What is the most critical exposure to the business? Step 3, you allocate the resources, the money, the staff, the tools. And finally, step 4, you build a concrete mitigation plan with owners and timelines to close every single one of those gaps. But you have to remember, this is a continuous loop. It is not a one-and-done project. Your profiles need to be living documents. Why? Because when a new law gets passed or a new technology comes out or your own business strategy pivots, you have to revisit your target profile, reassess the gaps, and adapt your plan. This, right here, is what mature AI governance actually looks like in practice. So as we wrap this up, I'm going to leave you with a question to take back to your teams. Using this profile methodology, what is the single most critical gap between where you are right now and where you want to be with your AI governance? Because just identifying it is the very first step to mastering it.